You wrote a book, A New Cold War, several years ago. Do you think what is happening now between Russia and Ukraine, between Russia and the West, is a confirmation of your predictions in that book, and is this a new Cold War?
I argued in the New Cold War that the problems actually started even before 2007 when I wrote it. And I think that I got the big picture right, that Russia was heading towards more repression at home and more aggression abroad. What I underestimated was that Russia was developing an ability to fight real military campaigns. I was mainly worried about Russian soft power, information warfare, the use of money in politics, and these sort of active measures. But I didn't believe then that Russia was going to be able to fight a war against a big country, and that's what we've seen in Ukraine.
What about the asymmetric warfare? I know that you were writing, you were outlining this strategy, you were studying Russian strategy for asymmetric warfare. How would you characterize it?
I think that this is at the heart of the kind of KGB Chekist approach to life generally, is you find the other person's weaknesses and exploit them. And what Russia does is to analyse Western countries quite carefully, and they see where are weak points. There's political alienation among the public because our political systems don't work very well. There's problems in our financial systems which are very greedy and have lost any sort of ethical base. There's problems in our media because the media is very weak and lacks a proper commercial model for doing real journalism. So they see all these things, and then they can exploit them. So in one country they may be, for example, using the energy weapon. In another one they do more propaganda. In another one they try and get into the political system. But it's almost like they have a toolbox of different tools. I've listed, I think, 15 or 16 different things they can do. And they will just apply whichever tools they think will work best for the objective they have in the country that they're targeting.
How successful is Russia in this asymmetric warfare, in your opinion?
Well, I think we tend to think from our point of view that it's not very successful because it's not making Russia modernise. The economy is still is really stagnant now. The public services aren't improving. The infrastructure is still bad. And so there's a very easy answer in the West to say that Mr. Putin has unfortunately made some mistakes, but we just have to wait until he sees reason again and then everything will be all right. But actually that's quite wrong. That from Putin's point of view, this is going very well. He's re-establishing a kind of soft hegemony in the countries of the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. He is derailing the EU as an economic security organisation, particularly in the field of energy. And he's created very substantial divisions and mistrust in the West generally, particularly between Europe and America. So all the things that he minds about, it's going pretty well, I'm afraid.
What do you think Putin's objectives are in Ukraine and beyond?
I think his main aim in Ukraine is a negative one. He wants to make sure that Ukraine does not become a success story. His nightmare would be if Ukraine was like Estonia, but 40 times bigger, because that would be an existential challenge to his regime. And I think he succeeded in that, and even in the best possible case, with no external interference and a lot of help from the West, it's going to be 5, 10, maybe 15 years before Ukraine really gets back on its feet again and builds strong institutions, salvages the economy, and heals the divisions in society. And with Russian interference, I think the recovery will be postponed indefinitely. So I think he's done a pretty good job there. He doesn't need to do very much more than he's done already for Westerners to say Ukraine is pretty hopeless.
What about Crimea? There are all these speculations that Putin would like to make a land corridor to Crimea because the peninsula is not self-sufficient. It relies on supplies of electricity and water from mainland Ukraine. How would you estimate the possibility of Putin actually doing that, of using more military force in Ukraine to carve this land corridor to Crimea?
Well, I think it's quite likely. But I think he could also get this some other way, because if he puts enough pressure on the authorities in Kiev, he can say to them, I will continue to supply you with gas at a certain price, or maybe find some other thing that they want, either politically or possibly personally, if he uses the corruption means, in order that Crimea continues to be supplied. So my guess is that we're going to see more military aggression in the months ahead. But if he doesn't do that, he'll certainly have to do something in order to supply Crimea.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Ukrainian government, Ukrainian civil society can do to resist Russian pressure, and whether it can rely on any more substantial help from the West that it has received so far?
I think, unfortunately, you basically have to do this on your own. The West has a limited appetite for supporting Ukraine. It has a limited appetite for doing anything really tough towards Russia. And insofar as the West is moving forward, it's moving on supporting the Baltic states and getting NATO back into shape as a territorial defence organisation, which is good, but not much comfort for you. So I think Ukrainians have to do this on their own, and it's all this stuff which is really boring and really difficult and really important about building functioning state institutions, strengthening civil society, consolidating society around the idea that the state belongs to the people and is not a kind of enemy, and really all the things that other post-communist countries have been doing for the last 25 years, which in Ukraine unfortunately has been delayed because of the dreadfully incompetent and corrupt political class which you inherited at the end of communism.
Russia is conducting a huge propaganda campaign both in Ukraine and in the West. How can we counter this?
Again, I think it's something you can't do entirely on your own, but you can certainly try and rebut these Russian myths when they come out. You can try and do investigative journalism about what Russia was doing in Ukraine during the Yanukovych era and follow up some of these dirty money trails to the West, which is where they end up. And you can do what you can to try and strengthen your media. But this is very difficult, and I think we have inherited from the Cold War a feeling that victory is inevitable because we won the Cold War. This time, I'm afraid, victory is far from guaranteed, and it's going to be very difficult indeed.
And I know that your recent book, your latest book, is on Edward Snowden, and basically you argue that he's basically a Russian spy. Why do you think so? And what is his role also in this asymmetric warfare, in these campaigns of disinformation, basically war on the West that Russia is conducting now?
Well, I can't prove that Snowden's a Russian spy. I've basically got circumstantial evidence and inference based on my quite deep knowledge of the way that the KGB and subsequent organisations work. And what's clear to me is that he is the sort of person that Russian intelligence would have targeted. They had plenty of means of getting alongside him and influencing him. They wouldn't necessarily have declared that they were from Russian intelligence. They would have pretended to be from some other organisation. It's the sort of thing they do, and they did it in the Cold War, and they've done it since. Certainly the result of what he's done has not been to expose terrible wrongdoing by America's NSA or Britain's GCHQ. What it's done is send a great deal of distrust and paranoia all over the West, both between Western societies and their governments and between Western countries, and it's knocked the West down a lot from the kind of moral high ground when it comes to the future of the internet. And all these things are very much in Russia's interests.